Welcome to Head to Toe Healing Live. We're so happy you're joining us today. And if you're brand new to Head to Toe Healing, it is a system that Dr. Kevin Reese created several years ago, where he works on three modalities in the body: the musculoskeletal system, nutrition, and mindfulness. Bringing those three elements together gets the body in a position where it's designed to heal itself, and amazing things happen. So today we're going to talk about a topic: infertility, for one. Infertility usually happens when a couple is unable to conceive after a whole year of trying with unprotected sex. But we're going to dive into it a little bit more to see what our specialists have to say. Today on our call we have Coach Ryan, we have Coach Gingy, and Coach Sean. So I'm going to pop over first to Coach Ryan. Ryan, with nutrition, how does that affect the ability for somebody to conceive a child, or I guess infertility, where they're not able to conceive for a long period of time? Could you explain a little bit about that, please?
From the nutritional perspective, basically every essential nutrient is involved in fertility in some way, either with the organ systems themselves or with sperm production, egg production, and then actually gestating the fetus. And keep in mind that one of the big problems, one of the main reasons that we have this epidemic of chronic disease in the first place is because of widespread nutrient deficiencies. Nutrient deficiency is a guarantee if you eat from the grocery store, basically. So that's already the baseline. But when a woman becomes pregnant, she needs more nutrients. The baby needs more nutrients. The RDAs, even the government recognizes this, right? The daily allowance for all the essential nutrients increases when the woman's pregnant. So if you're already deficient in the first place and you need more to become pregnant and to maintain that pregnancy, then you're in a pretty rough situation when the nutrient supply is short in the first place, right? The food supply is short of many of these crucial nutrients. So it's very difficult. And not just fertility has been going down big time in the last 100 years. And nutrition is one of the main categories of why that is. There's also chemical exposure. There's EMF. There's injectable poisons. There's all kinds of things that would uh, lower the fertility. But birth defects as well, still extremely common, and many of them are not recognized. Even something like just having a slow child, it's not that smart. To me, I would call that a birth defect. I was born with birth defects, and if you know what you're looking for, almost everyone is born with a birth defect. Even if you take something minor like having a dental arch that's large enough to fit all of your teeth, including your wisdom teeth. How rare is that? Right? How many people have all their teeth straight in line and have their wisdom teeth in? It's a very small number now, where that used to be the norm. So the fertility is decreasing, as is our ability to come to full term with perfectly healthy babies.
Thank you for that. I want to pop over to Coach Sean. Is there any way that the musculoskeletal system impacts the ability for a couple to conceive a child?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, absolutely. More so than what people think. I remember when I used to do a lot of analyses with Dr. Reese, and I would watch, and every single person that either had a child or was going to have a child had some type of posterior pelvic tilt. And right after, we would go back and to look at their symptoms or their any procedures or past surgeries that they had. And I would say about 90% of the time, probably like 95% of the time, every posterior pelvic tilt that someone had, it was always tailored to like a C-section or something like that. And so the more extreme, while conceiving a child, the more prone it is to turning out to be like some type of infertility. And so you just think of your pelvis like a bowl. And so how to have a proper birth, you're just pouring the bowl forward and the baby is going out and out of the birth canal and you birth the child. However, with a posterior pelvic tilt, the bowl is this way. So it's like holding a bowl towards you this way and trying to pour it out in front of you. You can't do it. It's going to pour onto your lap. And so that's what's happening. The child just can't get out of the birth canal. And on top of that, the body's knowledge, its wisdom predates everybody sitting on this call. And so our body does have fail safes. It's like a circuit breaker in a way. It has fail safes in place for when the birthing environment is just not right. And it could jeopardize either the mother or the child itself. And so, with that being said, yes, posture has a huge stake in just birthing a healthy child or just keeping the mother safe in the process of conceiving and pregnancy and such like that. And so I don't think that, it's anything to do with like somebody has a faulty switch or, they're just not able to birth. I think posture needs to be looked at if they're trying to have a child and they cannot have a child. Because usually the body just knows that if you were to have a child, it would not be safe for you or the child.
What about the men? I mean, I would think too how a man's body is structured or impinged for that matter. That might be a factor that would affect whether or not he could be that other individual involved in the process of getting his significant other pregnant. Have you thought about that as well?
Yeah, and it's all going to be in the same area. Like all of the pelvic misalignments that someone would have immediately or directly basically affects, of course, gut, but also reproductive organs and hormonal systems. And so if any of that is being impinged where nerves are being impinged or the bloodstream to deliver hormones, because that's how hormones get to the place they need to be through the blood. If those are being obstructed in any way or nutrition is not able to get in or anything like that, that's going to cause complications in the male's ability to effectively give the woman the proper resources needed to birth the baby or anything along those lines. That's leaking into like ED and prostate health. So yeah, absolutely. Posture, pelvis is the main thing you want to look into. It's like the bowl of life. And so if your pelvis is off, everything else is off. But pelvis also just mainly affects that digestion and reproductive health.
That's very true. Actually, there was a man that I spoke with many years ago. He had shared a story where he'd had a lot of chronic issues with IBS, Crohn's, colitis, things like that. And after he had surgeries, because he didn't know about head to toe healing back then. After he had some surgeries, the doctor said to him, "Hey, is everything working okay down there?" And he said, "Yeah, is there something I need to worry about?" But having surgeries in the stomach region, abdominal region, I would think that would impact the ability for things to work properly too. And I would think that might be a nutritional issue as well as a posture issue. Coach Sean, could you address that first potentially?
What do you mean? I'm sorry.
Well, when somebody has a surgery and they're missing some body parts, things get rearranged inside internally, that sometimes that soft tissue may not necessarily have an opportunity to heal or it could get impinged. Would you think, well, from what you've shared with me in the past, sometimes when people have that posterior pelvic tilt or their pelvis or their body's just not flowing the right way,
Mm.
and then they have something more complicated like a surgery that happens, it may impact it even more.
Yeah. I got distracted. What were you asking?
So what I'm just wondering, when people have surgeries
Hmm.
and they end up changing how their body functions, how would that impact their musculoskeletal system? Is there an ability to then, with posture therapy, help that improve?
Yeah, there is. I mean, it's going to be more helpful than any additional surgeries that the person is going to have because it's not addressing the root cause. We can always go after the root cause. Of course, you're going to be at a disadvantage because of what's been done, depending on the surgery. But it's not to say like you can just give up. It's you have plenty of room. The body is extremely adaptable, and so you can fix most things. But surgery's complicated a little bit, I've seen numerous people though in the membership that have had like shoulder surgeries, hip surgeries, and they've been able to get pain free. So it's completely possible, but just there's only so much we could do, you know. It depends on what type of surgery, especially if it's like, let's say, uh, a tendon rips off the bone or something like that. That's completely different because, you know, that would need surgery. There's certain things that we can't do, like, you know, there's room for the medical monopoly, but everything outside of that scope, yes, we can. We're the people you go to if you want to recover and get your life back.
That's awesome. I want to just pop over back to Ryan on that topic. When people have surgeries, how does that impact fertility? If, you know, parts of their colon are getting removed or different glands are being removed, does that have an impact?
Well, for those specific surgeries that you mentioned, they didn't do anything about the original problem. So if they're removing intestines or removing gallbladder, say the gallbladder had stones, they didn't eliminate the reason for the stones in the first place. They definitely didn't fix the digestion problem. So whatever problem this woman was facing, she's still facing it. And to now heal from the surgery, she needs even more nutrients than she had before, which goes back to the original problem. We were already nutrient deficient. That's the main reason why so many of these things would happen in the first place, or processed foods causing the digestion problem. And so she still has that problem, and now she needs even more nutrients to try and heal from the surgery. So it's just depleting the nutrient reserves even further. Going to make it even more difficult. Now the body's playing musical chairs with nutrients. It's going to put as many as it can towards healing rather than organ function, especially non-critical organ function, right? Like your body will preserve heart and brain function over everything else. The reproductive organs are not going to get priority in a situation where the body's having to make decisions on where to deploy its resources when it's short on them.
Thank you for that. Coach Gingy, with infertility, what is your perspective on how the mind plays a role in that?
Thanks, Karen. Mindfulness perspective is interesting because you could look at it before pregnancy and after pregnancy, well, even during pregnancy. So before, during, and after. And before pregnancy, you may notice this. It's more common statistically for a couple trying to conceive to deal with fertility issues than a couple not trying to conceive. There are way more accidental pregnancies than there are intentional pregnancies. And this implies something around the expectation. You could call it the placebo effect or whatever you want. This implies a mental and emotional engagement with the results of pregnancy or with the result of pregnancy. So I would I would ask the question to somebody who's dealing with infertility and they're actually trying to conceive. I would ask things like, how mechanical have you made the lovemaking process? Is it still an expression of love, or is it a mechanical, we have to do this at this right time in this right position in order to get pregnant? Because all of that, that the magic of it, the miracle of life, as you will, all of that plays a role in the chemistry and everything else that comes together as pregnancy. Now, if you're afraid of getting pregnant, or you get pregnant, you're afraid of being a good parent, all of those fear responses and stuff could do things to the digestive system, to the hormonal system, that may not be very conducive for the pregnancy. Like Ryan was saying, nutritional deficiency is one of those things at the very top of whether or not a female body carries the baby all the way to term. And we all know that nutrition gets absorbed in the gut. But if you've ever been afraid or angry or heartbroken or something like that, what happens to your gut? It shuts off. It's because we have two modes of our nervous system. And if you're in the sympathetic nervous system, then your whole digestive system is going to become compromised. Therefore, you're not going to be absorbing the right nutrients. Therefore, the baby's not going to get fully nourished, and the woman's not going to get fully nourished. There's all those types of things that can happen during pregnancy. Now, even if the woman is feeling a lot of fear, or if the relationship has a lot of contention, all of those emotional impacts can have an effect on the baby as well. So there's tons and tons of stuff. And then when you get all the way to after the baby's born, do you regret the baby? Are you happy now that the baby's here? Are you now dealing with all the cumulative effects of post and, during pregnancy? Sorry, post is after, pre and during pregnancy. There's a lot of the mind body syndrome that come into play. And what I would offer people right here, right now is to be aware and mindful of their imagination. Because you can imagine, say, if you're trying to conceive a baby, you can imagine both on the man and the woman's side why you're trying to get pregnant, and what happens if you do get pregnant, and what happens if you're sterile or you're infertile, or what happens if you're not a good parent. All of these what ifs that the mind creates, they can run away with you and they can sabotage the entire process. Now, they can also aid the process. So, as I tell all the people in the membership, it's not about getting rid of all of that stuff. It's about making it intentional. Because if you're intentionally creating, intentionally participating in your imaginatory process, then you can actually guide it to constructive ways where you're imagining the best possible outcome, and you're imagining things that fill you up with love and appreciation and patience and empathy and all of this good stuff. Those are all the kind of like healing side of the emotional spectrum. So, man, I could talk for hours and hours and hours about how you could impact, because it's such a delicate and long-term process that literally anything could happen. Like, say you do have a very stressful relationship and you end up breaking up in the first trimester. That's not to say that the other trimesters you can't also have really good, amazing, happy experiences that make up for all the other ones. And once the kid is born, it's going to be all about how do you impress upon this child how to handle that type of emotional and mental load. So tons of stuff. I know I probably glossed over a ton of things that need more explaining, but there you go.
Thank you for that. Coach Ryan, earlier you talked about birth defects and how that can happen for couples when they're conceiving and having children. Is there hope? Is there hope for those individuals that are planning to have a family to help prevent those birth defects? And if that is the case, how would they go about that?
Well, we would recommend being on all 90 essential nutrients for at least 3 months before even trying to get pregnant. More ideal would be 6 months, and fully eliminating any of the symptoms that the woman has. That sounds like a pretty tall hill to climb for a lot of people, but you're talking about what's ideal here. Ideally, the mother would not have any health problems herself, because if she has any problems associated with deficiencies, like my mother did, right? My mother had osteoporosis, gave birth to me. I had childhood arthritis and dislocated hips and all kinds of muscle, bone, and joint problems going forward, because she already had those deficiencies to begin with. And somebody who knew about nutrition would have just looked at her and talked to her. They would have said, hey, you're going to pass this deficiency on to your child if you don't fix it first. So fixing it first would be the top priority. It's not as well established that men's health plays as big of a role. I don't think it does play as big of a role, but it does play a role. Sperm quality does matter. And that's 1/2 of the initial cell cluster that's formed there. So that is going to matter, although top priority is fixing the mother, making sure she doesn't have any metabolic problems, structural problems, overweight, or whatever it may be. Fix all that first. And yeah, in a close to a perfect world, you'd have 3 to 6 months on proper nutrition first, with no health problems going into it. But I should say, let me say, I know, so yes, there's hope. Yes, there's hope. But it was shown over 50 years ago in a very famous experiment called the Pottinger cat experiment. A man named Francis Pottinger was raising a bunch of cats for a different purpose, and he was experimenting with their diets. And on one of the diets, he made them all have terrible health problems, basically. And he realized that it would take 4 generations to reverse that. Right, within the first 4 generations, they would all be infertile, by the way, every single one of them. And to get those 3rd generation back to perfect health would take 4 generations. So us doing everything right now and fixing this nutrient deficiency problem, it gives us hope to have better children than we would otherwise. Like maybe I would not have been born with the dislocated hips and the childhood arthritis and all that stuff, but I wouldn't have been at 100% genetic potential. The 100% genetic potential is what's going to happen 4 generations from now if we take it seriously right now.
Wow. Thank you for that. That's incredible. What that made me think of though is what people are ingesting with the food too must play a big role. We talk about the core 4 foods each week. Could you explain a little bit more about those for maybe somebody that's brand new to listening to this today and how that impacts health?
The core 4 foods are it's the most basic list of foods that you should avoid. That's gluten, oils, fried, and fake. Gluten, oils, fried, and fake. And yeah, those will screw up the digestion and they'll damage the intestine, and they'll also cause damage when those substances get into the veins, like the oils, oxidized oils. Once it gets absorbed into the system, it's going to cause damage in the system, which also demands more nutrients to overcome that. Right? You got to deploy all your antioxidants to try and neutralize all that, and then repair materials to go in and fix the damage that's been done.
So what about, Ryan, when people are on in vitro to go down that road, because they've tried everything, they hadn't found head to toe healing yet, maybe they already are going down that road. How could the woman support her body in that situation? Same thing or something different?
Well, I would definitely do the 90 essential nutrients no matter what. I mean, that answer goes for people who don't even have health problems, right? To avoid health problems in the future, no matter what, the answer for me is going to be, we all need 90 essential nutrients, period. So it's true whether you're trying to get pregnant naturally or not even trying to get pregnant or doing in vitro. In vitro, I personally wouldn't recommend it. I know it's a lot of people's last hope, but I would put the cards on the table trying to do it naturally, which would mean basically just getting the mother healthy enough to conceive in most cases. And in many cases, it can be done. There's lots of people who are considering IVF and, did our protocols and ended up getting pregnant. Some of them remarkably quickly, right? I said, you should do 3 to 6 months. We've had people within a month get pregnant when they've been trying for a long time. So it's possible, and it's worth that shot first, because anytime you're trying to force the body to do something that it's not doing on its own, you can create a problem. If there's a reason why the woman's not getting pregnant. So trying to force that, trying to trick that, it's not a good move.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. For those of you that are listening, if you have any questions about situations that are happening in your life, chronic pains, chronic conditions that you'd like our panel to address for you, please drop a note in the comments and we would be happy to address your question. Also, if you're interested in head to toe healing, the first place to start would be to go to drkevinreese.com and get one of his books. I'm going to just grab them here for you. See, you might want to start with Medical Monopoly first. This will give you a good overview about what's out there. And then when you're looking for solutions, this book here, Head to Toe Healing, really talks about the process of getting your body in a position where it can start healing itself. And there is a book link on our page. Dr. Reese has written several books, and that'll give you just a good foundation. And then when you're ready to take it to a next step, we have a start page on our website, drkevinreese.com. If you want to book an appointment with one of our coaches, we would be happy to talk with you about what's going on with your body, talk about your direct questions, and see if it's something for you. But in the meantime, let's get back to our panel. I have another question for Ryan. What about women that have PCOS? I read that a lot of times when they have PCOS, they have a hard time ovulating on a regular basis. Is that something that is, well, I know it can be turned around, but is it easily turned around? Does it take a long period of time? What's your opinion on that?
So it's not that easily reversed. It is reversible, but it's definitely not one of the easier things to do. And by the way, I should have mentioned, just going back to the IVF for a moment, there are multiple well-established risks with IVF. Even simple things like premature births or multiple births, right? Having twins, triplets, quadruplets. That also is just more stress on the woman. She needs even more nutrients to have twins than she does for one child, etc. The ectopic births, there's a lot of increased risk when you do IVF. PCOS, the woman with PCOS, obviously infertility is one of the main symptoms of PCOS. And the reason is pretty obvious. It's an overall systemic metabolic problem. And when women have metabolic problems, it tends to screw up their hormones real bad. Men too, but you don't see as many hormonal symptoms as you do with women. So since the metabolism is causing the hormonal problem, we have to fix the metabolism. You asked if it's easy. It's straightforward. It's not that easy though, and it's not that quick. It's going to take several months, that's for sure. And obviously that depends on the state of the woman, right? Someone with PCOS, it's 100% guaranteed she has other symptoms as well. And some of those could be quite serious. We don't know. We don't know. I would assume, without ever knowing the person, this is a hypothetical person, I would assume they have a digestion problem, which is what we would start with. We start almost everyone with a gut rescue protocol. And we'd be looking at her other symptoms too to try and categorize it. Is it a blood sugar problem? Is it a thyroid problem? Is it both? Either way, she's going to need many, many nutrients. There's always going to be many nutrient deficiencies involved when it's PCOS or endometriosis or any one of these female problems. It's never just one nutrient deficiency. It's going to be a whole group of them. And when that is fixed, yes, there shouldn't be cysts on the ovaries. There shouldn't be cysts anywhere. Cysts on the outside of the body is going to be the same basic problem. It's a metabolic problem, most likely in the blood sugar category. Could also be thyroid. If it's thyroid, it tends to take a little bit longer. And we have to use a couple of extra tools to fix that. But it is doable. I would be looking at 6 months to a year for full reversal, especially depending on the size of these cysts. Some of them can be quite huge. They are not going to just disappear. They're going to get smaller and smaller over time. Once we get the metabolism working correctly, they're going to get smaller and smaller over time. But if they're the size of a grapefruit, it's going to take a while. And I would not try to conceive until all of those symptoms are fully gone. Any associated symptoms, hot flashes, even irritability when you're hungry or teeth grinding at night, anything that's going to give us clues to a metabolic problem, basal temperature, all that stuff. We want to see all that stuff correct before conception, ideally.
Thank you for that. Another question I'm going to direct to Ryan and then follow up with Coach Sean. Mario saying, how can nutrition be absorbed in the gut if you have Crohn's disease?
Well, you don't have Crohn's disease, right? As Dr. Reese says, if you're not born with it, it's not yours. What you have is an inflamed intestine. And that inflammation is actually one of the easiest things to fix. Crohn's is actually one of the easiest things to fix. Most of the time, just getting off of gluten itself, just by itself, fixes Crohn's. Sometimes the person's gut is so damaged and they're so sensitive to so many things that we need to do more extreme restrictive diet, like getting them off all grains, maybe getting them off of dairy, because gluten isn't the only possible thing that can cause intestinal inflammation. It's the most common, it's the most likely, and you usually get the best results when you just get rid of gluten completely and never look back. But it could be other grains as well. Like I said, the person's gut is messed up, so they could be sensitive to a bunch of foods. And dairy is also very likely to be a problem. So usually fixing Crohn's is simply a matter of just getting rid of the bad foods. We'd fortify the gut back with probiotics and put lots of enzymes in for a temporary period of time, and they should be fine. Crohn's is typically quite easy. If it's a large intestine inflammation like colitis, it can be more difficult, can take longer. But Crohn's is one of the fastest, one of the easiest. Like I said, lots and lots of people have fixed their Crohn's, not even buying anything. They just heard us talking about gluten. They just completely got off of gluten and they got better. Maybe not 100%, maybe 90%, but awesome results just from doing one thing, just going gluten-free. And if you're committed, then you'll find the other foods, potentially, if it's there. Could be anything, could be corn, could be chocolate, could be soy. And these things, especially corn and soy, they creep into a lot of different processed foods, right? So if you just got rid of processed foods completely, then you'd be eliminating a lot of the most common, obvious, and hardest sources of inflammation.
Thank you for that. Coach Sean.
The question is, how can you absorb nutrients? Sorry, just...
That's okay.
fix it. Fix the Crohn's. You're not stuck with Crohn's. It's not yours. It's totally reversible. It's caused by foods.
That's awesome. Thank you for providing that insight and hope. A lot of people are dealing with Crohn's. I talk to them almost every week. Coach Sean, what about you with posture approach for somebody that has Crohn's disease?
Well, yeah, one of the reason I met and started working with Dr. Reese was because I had Crohn's colitis. And that's just what I was dealing with. I couldn't find the answer. And Dr. Reese kind of helped me get on track, but he introduced something that I didn't really believe in at first. And it was just the application of posture therapy to the condition that I was dealing with. And just that small change, literally, I had everything else in place, but adding posture alignment therapy is what changed everything for the better. In my situation, I have what's called sway back. And so all of the pressures pushing up against the intestines, and who knows what could have been happening. It could have destroyed the motility of my intestines. It could have compressed some nerves in that area. It could have, allowed lymphatic buildup to happen. Blood couldn't circulate properly through that area. I don't know, but I just know that within about 2 months, I started to feel no symptoms whatsoever. It's like I never had to deal with it. And I've been dealing with it for like about 5 years prior to meeting Dr. Reese. And so that was just the amazing thing that I learned from that. And ever since, I've been a believer in head-to-toe healing, but mainly posture alignment therapy.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing your story. That's so helpful. So many people come to us every single week where they've been facing chronic conditions for years, just like Coach Sean was, 5 years that he was dealing with Crohn's colitis. And it doesn't have to be that way. There are options with head to toe healing where you work on the 3 modalities. You work on getting the right nutrition, getting off the poor 4 foods, supporting the body, the musculoskeletal system. It is designed, the muscles are designed to move the bones where they need to go. And once they're in that position, everything flows so much better. And then also working with the mindfulness, making sure that inner dialogue that you're having with yourself is a healing dialogue, not one that's going to set you back. So if you're curious about head to toe healing, go to drkevinreese.com. We have a lot of testimonials there, a lot of free educational material too. Poke around on the website, get more information, reach out to us. We would love to hear from you. But I wanted to get to another question. This one is from Carrie. I'm going to direct it over at Coach Ryan first. What about having multiple UTIs? Is there something somebody can do naturally to turn UTIs around?
Yeah, she's acidic. UTIs, bladder infection, kidney infection, if any of this happens frequently, ear infections, anything like that, it just means the person has a weak immune system overall. And there's tons of different nutrients involved in the immune system. I know people get annoyed when I don't rattle off a list of nutrients. It's because we don't want you to go out and buy 40 different nutrient products. That's not reasonable. That's not the best way to do it either. We do have products that put mass amounts of nutrients in just a few products. So yeah, if she's getting chronic infections of any kind, then that means she has the weak immune system / she's acidic. 2 different ways to look at it. It means the same thing. It's the type of environment that allows bacteria, fungus, yeast to thrive, right? People with recurrent candida, recurrent thrush, they take a bunch of antimicrobials, it goes away a little bit, it comes right back. You're constantly on antibiotics 4 times a year for UTIs. All that means is that your body is on the acidic side, your immune system is weak, you need tons of nutrients to bring that up to proper function, and that should not happen.
So you mentioned something about being on antibiotics multiple times in a year for people that have that issue. How do they recover from being on antibiotics so long? How does that get turned around?
Taking a bunch of probiotics to reconstitute the flora and taking a bunch of nutrients, because antibiotics poison the system too. They damage your body. They don't just kill bacteria. There's a crossfire there. So you need nutrients to repair that damage. And if you had to be on antibiotics in the first place, that means you were sick in some way, which means you need more nutrients. You need more when you're sick than you do when you're maintaining. You need more to heal than you do to maintain. So more nutrients and probiotics, it's very basic. You can't go back. You can't undo that. But it shouldn't be permanent damage. And like I said, I didn't say it, but I should say it. They could do the normal treatments for the UTI. Like, once you're infected, you want to make sure it doesn't go up into the bladder or the kidney. That's a medical emergency now at that point. So they could go one of two directions. It's basically just changing the pH of the urine in one direction or the other. You could change it to acidic with cranberry and D-mannose. It's the most common things that people use, cranberry and D-mannose extracts, or pure cranberry juice regimen. Or you can go to the alkaline side and use baking soda. Either way, changing the pH to one of the extremes tends to get rid of the immediate infection, but it's going to keep coming back if you don't change the terrain.
And that's what head to toe healing is all about, is changing the terrain in your body so that way it can start doing what it's designed to do, healing itself. So next question we have is, Celestine is saying, how do I lower A1C and how to lower glucose from 300? Coach Ryan, I'll throw it back to you again.
Well, A1C obviously is a measure of blood sugar, sort of an average over around a 3-month period. I know it's annoying to hear me say that there's a bunch of nutrients involved in this and then there's a bunch of nutrients involved in that, but it's true. And I don't think it's the best way to get the message out there to say, oh yeah, you need zinc and magnesium and B vitamins and essential fatty acids. You need 15 different things for this one function. It's hard to remember. And again, if you try and go out and buy all that stuff individually, it's not going to make sense. It's probably not even going to work because there are at least 90 essential nutrients. They all work together, and several of them are catastrophically deficient in our food supply. We need many of those nutrients to produce insulin in the first place, to recognize insulin at the cell, and to actually utilize the glucose in the cell and burn it, so to speak, for energy. We need nutrients, different nutrients for each one of those steps. And any one of those steps goes wrong, you're going to have a blood sugar problem. Your A1C can be up without even your fasting glucose being up. In fact, it's more likely to be down, to be hypoglycemic, and your doctor would never catch that because they're not doing 6-hour glucose tolerance tests or anything like that. So the simple answer is, again, it's the annoying answer, but it is the answer. You need a lot more nutrients to handle your blood sugar problem. And you have already what's called metabolic problem. Blood sugar's in the metabolic umbrella there. So I'm expecting there to be other symptoms in the metabolic category. Most likely it's blood pressure. It's the most common thing. Elevated blood cholesterol. And mood and hormonal changes as well, even a thyroid problem. Again, it's all in the same umbrella. So we would be looking at each one of these symptoms and seeing what to target. We would use all 90 essential nutrients regardless, and then we would just add a couple of extras. Do we need extra blood sugar support? Do we need extra thyroid support? Depending on the case. Every case is individual. And diabetes itself, full-blown diabetes, can be reversed quite quickly. I know there's objections here. There's already people thinking, well, this guy didn't mention sugar at all. So I want to make it clear, sugar does not cause diabetes, or else everyone would have diabetes. It's not true. What's going on is that we're already nutrient deficient to begin with. You need nutrients to process sugar, a lot, especially processed sugar. Like these major sources, people in their coffee could have as much as a Coca-Cola in it, right? Multiple tablespoons full of sugar in these drinks that they're drinking and stuff. You need nutrients to process all of that sugar. We're already low to begin with. So you put more of this stuff in, you're creating more of a nutrient demand, and thus you're exacerbating nutrient deficiencies. In the case when you eat sugar, you're specifically exacerbating the deficiencies that you would need to process that sugar. And in nature, if you were to eat a strawberry or honey or something, it's going to have a bunch of nutrients in it. And maybe not fully enough to make it a net positive, but should be enough to help you consume that sugar, digest that sugar. Should have B vitamins in it, should have a little bit of minerals in it. Those same things that you would need to process that sugar. So now, when people are consuming primarily processed sugar, white sugar, that's had all of the extra nutrients stripped out of it. So now, you're already deficient to begin with, you better be getting them in some other way, right? This is why we supplement. You better have them in the body, or your body simply will not be able to process that sugar. So you got a lot of people here, I'm sure on Facebook, who have done diet restrictions or are even controlling their blood sugar, usually with pretty extreme measures. Like a lot of people in our membership, they came in, they haven't eaten any carb or sugar in like 4 years, 3, 4 years. And that's extremely strict. It's not sustainable for most people. It really is for people who are the most committed. And the problem is they don't need to be that committed. You're allowed to eat sugar on our program, right? You're not waking up to cupcakes and having butter tarts for lunch and lemon pound cake for dinner. You're not doing that, but you can handle some sugar. You can even handle some processed sugar. I can smash a whole plate of cookies if I feel like it. It's not going to affect my blood sugar to a major degree because I'm going to have a lot of nutrients in the body circulating already, able to handle that.
That's really good news for a lot of people because so many people have been deprived physically, emotionally for a long time doing diet after diet, program after
No way
program.
to live. Zero carb sucks.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to pop over to another related topic with infertility, which is lifestyle factors, starting with stress. And I wanted to circle back to Coach Gingy on this. It seems like chronic stress can really impact people's ability with hormone regulation and fertility. Do you have any additional insights about how stress impacts that?
Stress is a major role. Like, I think one of the main nutrients that usually is deficient or have some issue with is cholesterol. Cholesterol is like the foundation to all of our hormones. And if you're creating stress hormones like cortisol, like adrenaline, then that cholesterol is used to create those stress hormones. And I'm sure Ryan can talk a little bit more in depth on this, but if you're allowing yourself to become stressed out and panic or fearful or angry or whatever it may be, what you're doing is you're telling your body to create more of these stress hormones that turn on the fight or flight response. Like if you feel like you need to run away from a situation or raise your voice and yell at somebody, those are indicators that you're in the fight or flight response. Yelling at somebody is a way of like engaging in the conflict, and running away from somebody trying to get out of it, that's the flight response. So that is a good way for you psychologically to know if you've activated that side of the nervous system and if your body is now using its resources to produce these different hormones. And when you do that enough, you won't have enough hormones left to create other things like, say, melatonin is another hormone that helps us go to sleep at night. So if you're over here stressed out and you're not sleeping well at night, those two things could very easily be connected. So I start everybody out with just like I've got a catchphrase now, apparently. Just notice. Like there's nothing to do, there's nothing to fix. Just notice the patterns that are going on for you. Because if you notice that you're stressed out all day and you have a hard time sleeping, and you understand that there's a hormonal connection there, well, then you're like, wow, okay, well, maybe it's the stress that's keeping me up. And maybe it's the staying up all night that is causing me to be stressed the next day. Wow, I wonder how those could be interconnected. Once you start bringing awareness to these things, then you can start engaging with them intentionally and actually make a big difference. Whereas for most people, this is just the way it is in life. This is just normal to react a certain way or to be under rested or stressed all day or whatever it is. Or maybe they live a very, very peaceful life, but they're eating one of the poor four foods, like eating fried food all the time, or they're eating candy bars all the time. Those levels of sugar or oxidized oil in the system will automatically create inflammation. And that is your body having to then create a stress response to handle, like it will produce cortisol if you're eating fried food inside the system, just as it will create cortisol if you're having a yelling match with your spouse. Both of those things will create the same type of hormones because they activate the I'm in danger nervous system. I'm not safe nervous system. So it's very important to understand the stressors, to understand that it's psychological and it's physical, and to understand what are the patterns in your life that are causing the stress. Because if you can mediate those, if you can reduce them down, if you can be untriggerable, you stand the best chance of reversing any disease. In fact, I know people that all they did was reduce their stress, and a lot of their health issues went completely away. Just like I know people that have gotten off the poor four foods and a lot of their health issues went away. They didn't get 100% better, But man, I'm telling you, this is one of the biggest levers you could pull in your life to make the most amount of change.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I wanted to jump back over to Coach Ryan. In regards to lifestyle factors, there's also smoking or excessive alcohol consumption. Sometimes people are so conditioned to have that glass of wine or a beer every night. And well, I know with beer, a lot of times that'll have gluten in it. So you may have something to say about that. But how would that impact somebody trying to conceive if they have those habits, smoking, alcohol consumption, and there's drugs out there that are legal sometimes across the United States too, or in Canada. How would those impact?
Well, I would actually go against the grain and argue that both smoking and alcohol are not as big contributors to infertility and birth problems as the mainstream believes and even the alternative believes. Keep in mind that historically, people drank a ton more alcohol than we do today. And birth defects and infertility, the epidemic of the problem, didn't occur until the 20th century. There always was birth defects, and I'm sure there always was infertility, but the levels we're talking about were insignificant. Same with diabetes and cancer. These are ancient diseases, but they didn't really show up in relevance until the 20th century. So something else is going on here. Well, what used to happen before the 20th century? We used to have a lot more nutrients in the food supply. And keep in mind, children would drink beer for breakfast, right? For much of history, they didn't have clean, potable water. Alcohol was the way to ensure that you didn't die from diarrhea, basically, from drinking unclean water. So people would be drinking alcohol literally all day, every day for their entire lives. And yet birth defects were not a significant problem until the 20th century. So just keep that in mind. There's a real strong pressure not to drink anything or smoke anything while pregnant. And I'm not saying that you should. I'm just saying that the sentiment is a little bit misplaced when you realize the historical context, especially of alcohol consumption. So with that being said, I believe the next major thing is EMF, which I usually mention once a week. We don't go into a deep dive on it, but the problem of nutrient deficiencies came to full fruition in the 20th century at the same time that the EMF was steadily rising, and our chemical use and industrial agriculture and all that stuff, and the introduction of processed foods and microwaves and all of this stuff. It all happened at the same time. And all of those are significant factors for for fertility. But EMF is directly related to your lifestyle, right? It's not just what you put in your mouth, nutrition, it's how you spend your time, where you spend your time, what devices are you around, do you sleep with a phone next to you, do you keep a phone in your bra or in your purse all the time? It's got Bluetooth turned on, do you use Bluetooth headphones? Every single one of those things is going to increase the impact that the EMF is having. And to me, that is the next biggest thing. We have made massive progress in the nutritional field. We've created awesome supplements. We have done more than 100 years of great research with animals and humans. We've got nutrition pretty figured out. There's a lot we have yet to know. Science doesn't even know everything that's in honey yet. We haven't figured all that out. They're still arguing about a couple of nutrients right now that may be essential. But for the most part, we know a lot, and we have the tools to handle our own nutrition. It is in your control what you put in your mouth, right? No one's forcing you to eat junk food. You can make good choices, you can take supplements, and you can conquer that. EMF is much more difficult, and without a lot of conscious effort, you will not be avoiding EMF. And if anything, it's going up year after year, even month after month, it's increasing. So to me, that is the main reason why we're seeing such a dramatic rise in recent years in infertility. Of course, you've got the injectable poisons and all that stuff on top of it, which just makes it worse. Each one of these things is another notch, making us weaker and weaker, and thus less fertile as well. So EMF, that's a massive lifestyle thing. I could mention polyester. Polyester has even been shown to lower sperm counts and stuff. It's becoming kind of a popular meme now on social media where people know this, that basically synthetic clothing can reduce sperm count and possibly affect female fertility as well, but it's definitely been studied in males, humans, and dogs, possibly some other animals as well. So that's pretty well established, actually. And I would say lack of sleep, and tying into what Gingy said, lack of sleep and stress. I mean, we're so concerned about the future and the jobs and the dating market and all these things that just distracts us, stresses us out, as Gingy was saying, elevates cortisol, throws your other hormones off. Your body doesn't want to give birth if you're in chronic stress. And just because people aren't freaking out all day doesn't mean that they're not in chronic stress. I would say that the average normal lifestyle is a chronically stressed lifestyle. And the average person, whether they recognize it or not, has a sleep problem as well, which is going to wreak havoc in the hormonal system. All of those are lifestyle.
Thank you for that. I wanted to pop over and talk with Coach Sean again. What about sitting? It seems like people with their occupations, jobs, lifestyle, whether they're gamers, watching TV, doing something on social media, looking down on their phone, I would think that that would impact fertility too. Do you have any tips or things that you could share with individuals out there watching that are trying to conceive, that are sitters?
Just finding more time to get up during the day, even if it's just to walk around, go up some stairs, get more active moments in your life would be the best way to go. I mean, in the program, it's a lot easier because we can just give you routines, and I just think that would be the best approach outside of the membership. The more motion you have, as you say, Karen, motion is lotion. And so the more motion you have, the more or just less susceptible you are to have that posterior pelvic tilt develop from prolonged sitting, or the opposite, the anterior pelvic tilt. And so getting up and walking would be my best suggestion.
Thank you for that. Also, you talked about, people moving a little bit more, making sure that they're getting out of the chair so that way their body wakes up and it can start operating better. A lot of times people have the desire to make sure that they keep muscle on their body, muscle tone. And so they go and they do resistance training or weightlifting at the gym. What are your thoughts on weightlifting if there's maybe a dysfunction? Maybe they have a hip that hurts, or a knee that's hurting, or a shoulder that's hurting. I would think that their body's trying to talk to them. What's your opinion on that, Coach Sean?
Yeah, even in the classes, we say don't listen to that old adage, no pain, no gain. If you have pain, listen to that pain. It's your body telling you you're not doing something correct. And that's like actual pain, not like the burning sensation you get from working out, but sharp pain that you don't want to do more than once. And even Dr. Reese, he says straighten before you strengthen. And so we always say, like, especially if you have severe chronic pain or severe muscular dysfunction, we would say that do the classes first, do the posture alignment therapy classes first before you start to work out. So that way you're straightened out before you can strengthen. Because oftentimes what's happening is when you're going and working out and then working out again, you have pain. So you try to do some workouts with that shoulder until it gets better. It's just creating a larger dysfunction or traveling somewhere else. You're going to create more issues for yourself. So straighten before you strengthen is always the route to go, because you can't work out or outwork up an injury. It's usually going to develop into something. We have a lot of people that were fit during their time before they came into the membership, and you can see it in their body. You can see how they're fit, but you can see a large, prominent postural dysfunction somewhere in their body. And that could show, like they're saying, like I had back pain and my back pain never stopped. And we can see there's a clear discrepancy in the back. So, yeah.
Thank you for that. A couple more questions we have here. Angela, I'm going to direct this one over to Ryan. I haven't heard of this myself, but Angela's asking, do you agree with the grape and lemon diet? I'm wanting to try it. Have you heard of the grape lemon diet, Ryan?
Well, I do recommend fruit fasts sometimes. I don't usually recommend specific fruits. I know Dr. Reese used to, especially like grape fasts, right, which he's talking about here. And that would be mainly for kidney and liver support. But the way that I see it, if you do a fruit fast, first of all, you're eating the foods that are the easiest to digest. So the easiest for the body to assimilate. It's going to cause the least amount of distress in the body, right? Like meat has lots of nutrients in it, but it costs the body a lot to digest it, right? Same with starches and stuff too. They're tough on the system. So if you already have a digestion problem, eating foods that are easy to digest for a while gives the system a bit of a break and can help it heal. Of course, it can also support the liver and the kidneys, yes. But one of the main benefits of a fruit fast to me is that you eliminate basically all of the problematic foods. Because it's not just the poor four. Lots of different foods can cause problems for people. And even the ones I mentioned before, like soy and corn and chocolate, you know, those are more common and obvious and well known at this point. But if your digestion system is messed up, anything could bother you. Could be eggs, could be pork, could be dairy. Again, I said it earlier, it's a very common irritant. They say it's the most common allergy. Grains, definitely, not just the gluten grains, but even other grains, even rice, you know, that we wouldn't put in our bad list at all. But if you do a fruit diet, you're getting rid of all of those. You could potentially be allergic or sensitive to strawberries or cherries, or, you know, it's possible, but it's the least likely. So fruits are generally the least problematic for people. And if a food is causing some kind of constant antagonism to your system, then simply doing a fruit diet is obviously going to get rid of that. Unless it happens to be a fruit, but again, it's less likely. It's more likely to be a grain or some type of processed concoction. And you can't eat processed foods on a fruit diet.
Thank you for that. It looks like we have somebody new that's been watching us today. Eston's asking, why is olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, bad? Would you explain that, Ryan?
Because it's probably contaminated. Google it. Olive oil contamination in America. If you live in America, that's the worst place for it, but olive oil contamination is very, very common. What's it contaminated with? Cheaper oils, typically, canola oil, vegetable oil. Urine, believe it or not, shows up a lot when they've tested a bunch of different brands. Other junk can find its way in it. But most importantly, anything begins to oxidize as soon as it's removed from the living peel, shell, or skin. So everything has oil in it, every leaf, every fruit, every animal, everything has oil in it. But when there's a living shell, peel, or skin on it, it's protected from oxidation. As soon as that's punctured, as soon as the coconut hits the ground, it begins to oxidize. And it'll oxidize faster with more time, heat, and light, and oxygen exposure, of course. If it's in an oxygen-free environment, then it can't oxidize. So the bottles that you're buying, I don't care if it's cold pressed or extra virgin, it means nothing, because first of all, you're allowed to call it extra virgin as long as you don't specifically add heat. But when you're using a mechanical hydraulic press, heat is produced as part of that process. But since you didn't specifically add heat as something separate, you're allowed to call it cold pressed, even though it's categorically not cold pressed. Now, I'm not saying that every single brand is made that way, but most of them are. Giant hydraulic presses that produce a lot of heat during that process. The use of solvents is another problem, especially with tough shelled things like coconut oils. They use a solvent to dissolve the husk and then another solvent to dissolve the first solvent. Solvent means chemicals, right? Industrial chemicals. Solvents are very common in the making of oils anyways, but the olive oil you buy, once again, don't care if it's cold pressed or whatever, it's probably months old at a minimum, and it could be up to 2 years old. In any brand in any American grocery store or Canadian or Australian, anywhere in the Western world, you know, if you saw it being pressed in front of you with an old school press where a donkey walks around the pole for a couple hours and squeezes it all out, and there's not a lot of heat added in there, that's fine. You could consume that for dinner, just don't heat it. Because more time, heat, and light all increase the oxidation, and that doesn't matter what type of oil it is. Some oils are more resistant to oxidation than others, but everything will oxidize eventually, including all oils. They all come in a bottle with oxygen in it, right? And most of them do have dark bottles, so maybe light exposure or UV exposure is not the biggest problem with a lot of these commercial brands. But heat, time, and oxygen exposure are definitely factors. And if you're drinking stuff that was pressed 3 months ago in Spain in a giant hydraulic press, It's probably contaminated, first of all. It's probably at least half oxidized, second of all. And you really don't know all the details of what went into it, including solvents and stuff like that. You don't see solvents on the label ever.
Thank you for that explanation. I love that about you. There's always more than we bargained for when you share. It's fantastic, Ryan. So a couple more questions and then we'll wrap up for the day. Divine is asking, I have no gallbladder. Is there anything I need to take? Ryan, if you would have an opportunity to maybe share what somebody can do if they're missing a gallbladder.
You need bile every day before every meal for the rest of your life, because the gallbladder used to hold bile and release it as a timed release when food was there. One of the purposes of bile is to help digest fats. So when they remove the gallbladder, they just attach the liver directly to the intestine. And so it just leaks in bile all the time instead of having that built up timed release. So there's basically never enough bile there to do the job. So you need to supplement with bile. It's usually sold as ox bile. We use a product with bile in it and with a bunch of different digestive enzymes in it, and with betaine hydrochloride in it, which also helps to acidify the stomach. It's a pretty well-rounded digestive enzyme product, but at the bare minimum, you need bile. I personally would use bile and enzymes, especially because a well-rounded enzyme product is going to have lipase in it, which digests fats. So you want to just help all this thing out. The problem is that you're not digesting fats properly, right? So if you put in the bile and the lipase, now your body is better able to digest that fat despite not having a gallbladder.
All right, one last question. We have it from Megan. She says, I have a genetic blood mutation and I'm being dropped from every doctor I see. Do you think there's an opportunity for her with head to toe healing where she can get some help?
Yeah, medical doctors are not equipped to help this type of a problem. You know, in the case of sickle cell, for example, they can do nothing about it, absolutely nothing. They can't prevent it. They don't know what causes it, and they don't know what relieves symptoms. In the case of sickle cell, I don't know what blood disorder she's talking about, but in the case of sickle cell, usually the person's problem is just pain, right? They go to the hospital for pain attacks. So what they call have an episode, pain episode. And the doctors have painkillers, so they can treat sickle cell. It's a pretty weak treatment, but they can, in a way, they can relieve one of the symptoms there. And with many other blood disorders, what are they going to do, right? If you don't have pain or a bacterial infection or something, or there's not an enzyme that they can block, like beta blockers and stuff, you know, that will, you know, slow the heart down or whatever it is they're trying to do, they just can't do anything. They know nothing about nutrition. For most of them, that's literally true. In most medical schools, in 9 years of school, you know, pre-med, med, and then internship, you might take 4 hours of nutrition. At a better school, maybe you took 20 or 40 hours. It's still highly inadequate. And usually that stuff's not even on the exams anyways, so they don't even have to show up to those classes. So most of them know literally nothing about nutrition, which is a shame because your blood is basically produced in the bone marrow. Your bone marrow is hungry for nutrients. It needs tons of different nutrients. And it's a factory producing all kinds of really important cells like stem cells and stuff. So if doctors don't know anything about nutrition and you're not having pain as your main symptom or something that they can actually help with, I put help in quotes there, I guess, then they're helpless. So of course they're going to kick you loose. Why would you be under their care when they're not equipped to help you in any way?
Thank you. I'm going to squeeze in one more question here.
Well, hold on. Sorry. So can head to toe healing help them? Certainly. You're guaranteed low in many, many different nutrients. We've had tons of people with various different blood disorders, especially the sickle cell and thalassemia, you know, with great success. We've had people who never had a pain attack again. And I don't know what disorder she has, but I'm going to assume that her bone marrow and her whole body needs a lot of extra nutrients, especially a bunch of minerals, trace minerals.
Okay, great. Thank you. So there's an individual here in our comments. Her name is Janet. She and I spoke yesterday. She says, every time I put food in my stomach, I feel fatigued. Why do you think that might be, Ryan? Is there anything that comes to mind?
Specifically, no, I couldn't point to a specific nutrient deficiency or something. I would just assume that her whole system is behind, and I would also assume that she has other symptoms, lots of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe she scored on her symptom score chart 25 or 26 out of 60. So she was pretty high.
If she doesn't have enough nutrients there in the first place to digest the food, then like I was saying with the sugar earlier, you put food in, you're causing a nutrient tax. The body's already short, says I don't have any money to pay this tax. Okay, well, you don't get any energy out of the deal then because you don't have enough to digest and assimilate that food.
Okay, thank you. For those of you that have joined us today, we really appreciate you being here. If you're curious about head to toe healing, want to get more information, first thing you need to do is check out Medical Monopoly book, the red book, followed by the green book. And you can find all of these at drkevinreese.com. There's a tab that says books. A lot of great educational information there. If you want to schedule a call with one of our coaches, we would be happy to talk to you about your specific conditions, pains, what you're trying to turn around. Reach out to us and we would be happy to help. Until next week, have a wonderful rest of your day. We appreciate you joining us and see you next time.